New Radio Sports Network and 105 on the go. Mike Peck joining us after a 28-12 defeat to Gillett. And Coach, what was the message to your team just a few moments ago on the field, where in a game where this has probably been their most competitive matchup all season long?
That's the first thing we talked about is how it was in a ball game. And actually, the one thing we talked about kind of it was unfortunate is this is probably the first game all year we haven't got every kid in the game. But we talked about how when we're in competitive games, we might only have a 10 to 12 person rotation instead of all 16 to 17. And so that was probably the most unfortunate part of the message that was given. But yeah, we played a competitive game. I think we as coaches did a good job of putting some new stuff in to make our kids hopefully try something to play a little faster, to be a little more successful. And I think you saw a little bit of the success they had. I mean, we could see some of the frustration from the Gillett kids as our kids were blocking, which is very atypical of Gibraltar football. So we kind of threw something at them they weren't expecting. So now next week it'll be interesting when now a team's got a lot of film on it and Suring and see what they come in with and how they plan to try and stop that double wing.
It seemed like with that double wing, it allowed Will Lisi and Giovanni Mercier to get a little bit more space and a little bit more downhill running before they reached contact. How important was it for those guys to kind of get their feet underneath them when they got to the line and started hitting defenders?
Yeah, we actually, the message we were preaching, I was preaching all week. I'm the one that put that in. It was my decision, was 3 hard yards. So basically what we wanted is a mess of guys at the point of attack, and we was starting a motion and putting 2 of our best kids out on the edge to be able to block. We figured we'd at least have kids in the way, and you could see it. They were picking and choosing. Sometimes we made the right choice, sometimes we didn't, but just about every time we got 2 to 3 yards, and that's, I mean, right now that's the motive we have to try and move the ball, and we'll work on it. We'll get a couple more options off them plays, and next week we'll hopefully be a little more dynamic.
And to be honest with you, I know wing T, more of a running play, but when you would pass out of it, I thought Anders Johnson did a good job throwing the ball, especially when you had those drag routes. Will Lisi had a couple nice grabs, and so did Jeffrey Mize a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, there were, like I said, we only had about five or six plays in that whole package. So, I mean, you probably noticed there was a lot of the same play coming at them. And our model was if we were getting 3 yards, we weren't going to change. But obviously you have to have some counter off it. Otherwise they would settle up there. And I think Anders, I truly believe that in the double wing, when we had him in there, you could see what his ability is and how he's going to help us down the road at Gibraltar. And then you could see a little bit of our base offense when he was in there. It's sometimes our base offense maybe is more complex than we think it is. And it's one of those things we're going to have to work on, trying to simplify some things for some of the younger guys.
And defensively, they tell you that the hardest thing to do is to cover for 7 seconds, and Jesse DeBush certainly made you guys do that a few times tonight.
Yeah, I didn't tell my kids, coming into the game that he was out for the last 3 games. I knew that. But when I came and talked to their coach before the game, I found out he was playing, and I knew we had our hands full. Clearly, in my opinion, he's probably the all-conference quarterback, even though he didn't play for 3 games. And you kind of saw it tonight. He obviously gives them a chance in any game with his arm and his legs. And I really think our kids, we did a really good job. I mean, there are times where I think some of the calls didn't quite go our way that I thought should have went our way. And then that's just sometimes the way it goes. And we'll go back and we'll be better next week.
And obviously, the final question for you, Coach, even though it wasn't a win, how much confidence does this give your team going into next week when you guys play Suring, knowing that you can play competitive football, you can hang in with these teams and make some good plays?
Yeah, I think, we talked about it 2 weeks ago. We need to get in the end zone before we played our big rival. And then we scored more than 6 points last week, and we only scored 12 tonight. But we consistently moved the ball up and down the field. We actually possessed the ball. We shortened the game, essentially. And unfortunately, they lengthened it when they were passing all the time. But, I mean, we were trying to give our kids the best chance to win, and we knew if we could keep the clock moving in a low-scoring game, our kids would have a chance.
Well, we'll have Gibraltar football for you next Friday from Fish Creek when Suring comes to town. Coach, thanks as always for joining us after the game.
Thanks, Tim.
You've been listening to the 105 on the GOAT and the New Radio Sports Network.